Hey, folks. Welcome to the First Issue Club, your weekly comic book podcast where, just like Sue Storm, we love a good read. And of course, we're talking about the reed in a woodwind instrument. Ooh, those dulcet tones that come from
the woodwind.
wood horns. Nothing like it. What do you think about that, Greg?
What do I think about wood horns?
Yep.
I think they're a bit naughty. But I'm Ching. Thank you.
Hey.
If you can make a tree joke, so can I. Did you play an instrument as a kid?
No, I didn't.
You're too cool.
Yeah, that's what it was. The opposite of what most people think about guys in bands that are rad.
Well, to be clear, it's a school band.
I'm too cool. You're thinking strictly school band, okay?
Right, yeah.
I was
we all know that
imagining
you
a
played the double-necked guitar in your
rad ska guy who was
in
just
your alternative school days.
ripping on clarinet. Of the most popular ska instrument, clarinet.
Just throwing down on hot cross buns.
This podcast is brought to you by Boulevard Brewing Company's Space Camper Cosmic IPA, the tastiest IPA in the universe, hazy and hoppy in all the ways you like. Get out to your local liquor store, especially if you live in Kansas City, where Space Camper is proudly brewed.
Yum, yum, give me some Dynamite Tum Tum, Boulevard Space Camper IPA. It's not a beer, it's a journey.
That's right. Today on our Patreon, Greg and I, I'm Mike D, he's Greg.
Hey.
Greg and I talked a lot about some of the news out of the Comics Pro Summit, which was fun. There's a lot of news to discuss there. We talked about Lisa from Blackpink making a comic book. We talked about
Lisa from Blackpink for a long time.
Whether we liked, we really got into is White Lotus good or not. Talked about a bevy of things. We did an extra half an hour maybe than we normally do on our Patreon episodes. So got a long one over there. If you want some supplemental comic book news content from us this week, head over and listen to the Patreon episode.
But in the meantime,
yeah,
we have a special treat for the main feed. I had the privilege, nay, the honor, to talk to Matthew Rosenberg, who did Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, What's the Furthest Place from Here, a bunch of DC stuff, a Punisher over on Marvel. He has a new book coming out on Image Comics called We Are Taking Everyone Down With Us. It is kind of a different interpretation of the spy genre. It delves into family relationships, what it means to have a family, and there's robots. So it kind of checks a lot of boxes for me, and I think it would check a lot of boxes for you too, listener. So what we're going to do is we're going to have another entry into First Interview Club. It's a show we do once a year when a creator asks to come onto our show, and it's typically only once a year. So we got it out of the way in February, and Matthew talked to us for a good hour, and it was amazing to talk to him.
Oh, that's awesome.
He is huge into comic books and punk rock and revenge stories, and it was so much fun to talk to him because I love all of those things, and he was just a wealth of information. He's such a warm person to talk to, and just huge wealth of knowledge on comic books and everything else. Big chocolate milk fan, I found out in the interview, and you will too if you stay tuned. But so we wanted to share that with you and to tell you that on March 26th the book will drop. So go out to your local comic book shop or your favorite digital retailer and purchase We Are Taking Everyone Down With Us. And I'm not really telling you to because you're your own person. You can live your own life. But I'm really recommending, okay, if you do one thing this year, buy this book. Please.
Whoa.
Please buy this book. And maybe we can have 2 First Interview Clubs a year.
You can vote next year. The one thing you got to do this year, buy a comic book. Hey, a little escapism, right?
It never hurt anybody.
It never hurt anybody.
I think that's it. We just wanted to do a quick little intro so you weren't thrown off when you missed us for a week. It's just like, why is Greg talking to some random cool person that makes comic books? Well, it doesn't happen that often because we're not that professional.
They try to avoid us like the plague.
They really do. And I don't think Matthew knew much about us, so he was tricked, and I had him for a whole hour. No, I'm kidding. You know why we don't do them? There's two reasons. One, scheduling these things is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Two, I suffer from such anxiety talking to people that make the things that I love that I was sweating through 2 shirts talking to Matthew. It was so nerve-wracking. But and he was great. Like, he was so nice and like easy to talk to that I can't imagine talking to someone like that isn't like that anymore, because I would just be like a chattering mess of just like, Brian K. Vaughan, what's next with Saga? Vomiting over my microphone. Anyway, all that to say, I hope you enjoy the interview. And if you want basically a regular First Issue Club, head on over to the Patreon, because it's all over there where we talk about the news, TV shows. I introduce a new entry into the Patreon mythos called The Pile, where I talk about graphic novels that I've read, so that you don't have to, and maybe pick them up after the review I give.
Can I run down the list really quick of some of the firsties that we didn't get to talk about, just to like shout out comic books to check out?
Of course.
I wanted to call out Zatanna on DC Comics.
Zatanna, you've been called out?
Jamal Campbell is doing double duty on that one, and I love an artist writer.
Nice.
So really cool.
I heard
he
even stapled it. Triple duty.
Can you believe it? Weapon X-Men is written by Joe Casey. Thunderbolts Doomstrike is Lansing and Kelly.
Fuck yeah.
Star Wars Fear the Jedi, which I think is one of those High Republic books, is Kevin Scott. I'm also interested in whatever this Herculoids book is, which is a Hanna-Barbera thing that maybe spun out of like the whole, like their success with Space Ghost over on Dynamite. That easily wins in true Dynamite fashion. That wins the variant award this week with 33 variant covers for that book.
Mamma mia.
Let This One Be a Devil by James Tynion is a blue book title about the Jersey Devil.
Fuck yeah.
And then I don't know, a couple ones that are just kind of on my radar, but I'm not really sure about them. Godzilla Heist.
I'm
is a
for
comic
sure reviewing that next week. So
yeah, and it sounds
tuned.
a lot like Kaiju Score that we covered on the podcast years ago. So I've kind of got mixed feelings about that, but interested how it differentiates itself. And then Stranger Things has like a Dungeons and Dragons crossover that's a prequel to season 4 of that show.
Okay, nice.
Those were some of the books that stood out to me or had writers and art teams that I am a fan of. So some stuff to keep you satiated, and maybe we'll do them in a catch-up club at some point.
A catch-up club is
back issue club.
Catch-up club is different than the other show we do where we review ketchup.
Yeah.
That was the worst joke I ever made on this show. Okay. Stay tuned for First Interview Club. Thank you, Space Camper IFPA, for being the best beer in the whole world. Patreon.com/First Issue Club. We're on YouTube. We're on other social medias, but we don't really like it. But anyway, see ya. Hey, everyone. Welcome in to a special little mini segment we have in our regular show, First Issue Club. This is a segment that I have called, that has not been mandated or approved, First Interview Club. It's a show that we do once every blue moon when a special creator comes on and talks about a new project that they're doing. And today we are joined by a club favorite, Matthew Rosenberg, and he's here to chat to us about his new 6-issue series out on Image Comics. We are taking everyone down with us, which follows recently orphaned 13-year-old Annalise as she tries to escape the secluded island that her mad scientist father was just murdered on by the hands of the world's greatest spy. But not to worry, Annalise is being protected by one of her father's hyper-intelligent robot bodyguards, and now Annalise has to make sense of the world without her father and decide if revenge really is a dish best served cold. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us on First Issue Club.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be the once in a blue moon. Did I write that? Where did you get that? Did I write that?
I wrote
Did
that
you wrote
before
that?
yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say that's good. I don't think I wrote that.
You can have it.
Thank you. I had to, when you get ready to do a book, you have to write a lot of like solicits, and so you're always sort of figuring out. So there's lots of like drafts and iterations of like how you want to talk about the book, and like
Sure.
a preview and a press release and all this stuff. And so it gets a little confusing. And then I was like, oh, that sounds good. And then I was like, wait, I don't think I wrote this. So that's a little humbling, but it's fine. It's fine. We're fine. We'll move on.
Well, I mean, that's a fun question for me though. Like, is it more stressful to write the comic or the blurb about the comic?
So there's a sort of more complicated thing, which I don't think other people ascribe to, but the blurb on the first issue is brutal, awful job. I don't think anyone should ever write it and not send it to someone else who didn't work on the book but has read it, and someone else who didn't work on the book and hasn't read it. I think you need those two sets of eyes to see if it makes sense and it sounds intriguing. But by issue 3, right, I'm also of the opinion, like, this isn't Spider-Man. Like, we're not like, well, what is it? We can't be like Dr. Doom shows up and that'll get readers. People are reading the book or not. And so by issue 3, I don't really care. I just I kind of put whatever I want in the solicit. So if you
put in random lies at that point.
I mean, I have lied in the solicits before for books. I mean, I think the solicit for my old Creator Owned book, 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank, I think the solicit for issue 4 is like, they go to the bank. Also, a dog shows up. And I think that's the whole solicit. I'm like, I don't know what you want me to say that's going to be like, jump on the book 4/5 of the way through. It won't make any sense or be engaging. It's not really a marketing term you can come up with.
To me, that's like the perfect solicit. Just like right to the point, like 4 kids and a dog. Like, I'm fucking in. Like,
sure.
Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the dream, is to say something dumb and then have people be like, I like it. And you're like, okay, then that's best of both worlds. But yeah, no, writing the book, writing a first issue is very stressful. It feels like it's not my job, even though it actually is my job. So it feels awful. Whereas like when writing a book is hard, which is often, I actually know that that's my day job. And so the hardness is just part of having a job. But it's writing solicit is just sort of insufferable when you start.
Real quick, speaking of 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank, congratulations. It's being turned into a movie. I read recently that you were in Ireland on the set, or?
I was, yes. Yeah. We just finished filming 2 weeks. My sense of time is terrible. 2 weeks ago, they just wrapped shooting. I wasn't there for the wrap. Missed the wrap party. Very sad. But yeah, right before Christmas, me and Tyler Boss, my partner on the book and longtime collaborator buddy, were producers on the movie, and we flew over to Dublin and went to the set for a bunch of days and hung out with everybody, and then wandered around Dublin and ate some pizza. Normal
traditional Irish cuisine.
They had a like, we're both from New York, and they had a place that was like New York pizza, and we were both like, fuck you, let's go do it, and laugh at them. And then it was like, man, that's pretty good. Like, kind of a bummer. I was like, well, I guess everything gets less special in time, and New York City is no stranger to that. Dublin,
I think it's just widely accepted though that New York has the best style of pizza. Like,
but as a New Yorker, you want to believe that no one can even make it, that it's just like, oh, if you ask someone to make this thing that's so complicated, it's bread and cheese and sauce, like, you couldn't put that together. And it turns out other places can do that just fine. Like, it's fine. But yeah, we went to the set and it was very fun.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
I loved that series. You and Tyler did an amazing job on it, and to see it being turned into a talking picture is kind of wild, and I'm very excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah, it should be very cool. It's one of those very weird things of you don't ever expect it to happen, and you don't sort of plan for it, and then when it happens, like, I feel funny because I'm like, well, we set out to make the book, and we did, and the book came out, and some people liked it, which is a bonus. And so this all, like, just the way people react to it is always funny to me, because I'm like, well, it's both our thing entirely and completely separate at the same time. And so there's just a very, like, surreal kind of hard way. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it, I guess, is the best way to put it. But it's cool. It's very cool. The cast are great. And Frankie Shaw, our director, is awesome, and she's just a force of nature. And I think people are gonna really dig it. So I think if you like the book, you'll really like the movie, and if you didn't like the book, you'll probably really like the movie too. So
Well, we're all very excited to hear over in First Issue Club, but we're here to talk about, we're taking everyone down with us, your newest series out on Image Comics. You recently spoke about it, saying that it's kind of like heavily influenced by James Bond and Johnny Quest, as well as a little bit of Love and Rockets. And
sure.
After reading the first issue, it does feel like a very like lived in real world. And so I just want to ask you from the jump, like when you start these big encompassing stories, you've mentioned before that you're a world builder, you like these big kind of stories. Do you start big and then like zoom in, or do you like start with the intimate relationships and then just kind of explode out from there?
Yeah, I love a big world. I love playing in a big world. I love the stuff that happens off screen that you only get a hint of or a sniff
Right.
of. I think that's very fun. For me as a kid, like I grew up reading, superhero comics, and when you start reading superhero comics, it's the most amazing thing because you're just like, Nick Fury shows up and you're like, I don't understand why is this guy's yelling at Captain America? This is so crazy. And after a time, everything is explained, and then you learn all of it, and you're like, well, that's cool in a different way. But I love that. I never lost the sort of love of that, and that sort of speaks to the Love and Rockets. Like that's a very lived in world, and that's a big
Yeah.
influence for me of just like their strange rules and universe of characters who wander in and out. But no, I always start. I call myself a character first writer because I'm pretentious, but I like to know who the characters are, and then
Mm-hmm.
I build from there, and I figure out who they are and why they are the way they are and how they got there, and then from there naturally like sort of tone starts to come, and high concept starts to come, and I just take these characters that I know very well, and then I do horrible things to them after the fact. It's never I don't have Grant Morrison brain. I don't have Jonathan Hickman brain where I'm just gonna like have this idea that's $1 billion idea. I'm much more, well, I hope you like these characters because we're gonna go on an adventure together kind of guy. Which isn't particularly selling the book well, but I'm being honest, and maybe that's worth something.
Um, the story is kind of unique because you're getting the side of a spy versus spy from the other end of it, of just like the aftermath, and from a character that isn't really involved in the conflict at all. I read an article that said that this kind of spun out from a Marvel book that got canceled during the
Yeah.
pandemic. Why is it? Why now? Why do you think this is the best time for this book to come out? And where did that little tiny little seed get planted for you for this?
So yeah, this was Stefano Landini, my partner on the book, and we worked together on The Punisher a bunch of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved working with him, and he was great. And then we were supposed to do a different book at Marvel, and it was right when the pandemic started and everything was paused, and there was no books being distributed, and stores were closed, and everyone was told pencils down, and a bunch of editors were furloughed, including our editor. And then when the machine started back up again, things had been shuffled, and I was no longer writing the book, I found out. And Stefano, being a true gentleman, emailed me and was like, I'm very sad we're not doing this book together, and we should do a book ourselves. And he said, I was really looking forward to working with you. And I said, yeah, I would love that. And he said, I have an idea. And I said, awesome. And that makes my job so much easier. And then he sent me a drawing of a robot and was like, I think this is cool. And I was like, cool, what's the idea? And he's like, that's it. It's a fucking cool robot, man. And I was like,
here's my idea. Now you go.
Yeah. And and he was right. It's a fucking cool robot. And I took it because I'm pretentious. I took his idea and I printed out a picture of his robot, and I really studied it for a long time. And I came back and I was like, okay, it's a story about family and following in the footsteps of your parents, and it's about regret, and it's about revenge, and it's about the threshold of adulthood and crossing that line, and the choices you make and the repercussions they have. And he was like, oh. I thought it was just going to be about a cool robot. and I it wasn't until issue 3 that I sort of learned. I was like, oh, he was right. Like, the robot is really cool, and we could have had an awesome book that was just, this is a cool robot that punches people to death, and it's fucking really fun. But I think the book is good because it's a synthesis of the two of us pulling in different directions, and so every idea is sort of tested and by the other, because we want different things out of the book, and so we're trying to satisfy both of us. And I think I sort of love the book because we are. That was a long non-answer to your question, but to circle back, the one of the things I wanted to do when I saw the robot, like, he had a very sort of sexy spy angle to him, like Stefano's Italian, and so there was like they make a lot of really sexy stuff. Like, they invented the sexy car. Like, they're just a sexy
and pizza.
people. They invented pizza, and they're New York's the best at it, but they do okay. But I wanted to do a spy book, and I love spy stuff. I'm a huge James Bond nerd, and I'm a big, and I love Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I love The Quiet American. I love your Graham Greens and your John le Carre's. But, like, I just love all of it. But I also am fully. I grew up loving James Bond, but I'm old enough to be like, well, it's problematic in places. Like,
oh yeah,
I mean, the obvious misogyny is a problem, but also just like, you hit a point where you're like, I don't love the idea that the government just lets a guy decide who gets killed. Like, well, I don't like that.
Yeah.
There's a thing called due process, and actually we really like it. It's very good. It really helps people be safe, be protected from their government. And so that sort of started spinning of like, well, I want to do a spy book, but I don't want to do a James Bond book. And then I look at the sort of more grounded stuff, and even like Queen and Country by Rucka, and Velvet and by Brubaker and Epting. Like, those are books that are like much more grounded, and I'm not a smart enough writer to do that. Like, I can't deconstruct the spy story from the other side. And so I wanted to do a story that still has that James Bond energy, but sort of paints it in the problematic, absurd light that it has, while still being a celebration of it too. I think it's okay to love problematic things, and you just have to go in and be critical and acknowledge that. And so the idea really was, if I'm going to do a story about violence and these power struggles that hurt people, like, I think the way violence is portrayed in pop culture is very not dishonest. I think it's irresponsible a lot, because it's often portrayed as a 1-to-1 of this person kills this person hurts this person, and that's not actually how violence works. It has a ripple effect through communities and families and people and countries and all of these things. And so from thinking about that, I came to the conclusion of like, well, if you do a James Bond story, what does a villain's daughter do when this guy shows up and tries to kill her dad? Like, what does a villain's family do? And that to me was interesting. And that's sort of the seed for the book, of just like, it sounds like a fucking bummer when I talk about it. It's fun. I promise the book has jokes.
And robots. This is a great book.
Yeah, it's got robots and jokes and like, some romance and then it's also a bummer too. I mean, maybe not so much romance.
Some of the best books are bummers, though. You know what I mean? Like, we got to feel all the emotions.
I do think that. I do think the best comedies have some true sadness into them, and the best dramas have some great jokes in them. And so I tell myself that as I make my robot punching people's heads off book very sad. But I think the idea is to take all those things and sort of synthesize them, to do the fun, over the top, goofy spy thing, and do the sort of study on the celebration of that, and sort of be critical of it and look at it in a different way. So it's a lot of different ideas sort of smashed together.
Because I was curious about that, because like one of the main themes in a lot of your books is like acceptance and finding your community. And just like trying to make your way through life without destroying someone else's. And like growing up, I was like a kind of like a loner kid, and like I connect with that stuff of just like trying to find your tribe, so to speak, or just like trying to find out who you are.
Sure.
And so I was curious, as like, did you have any personal connection to that, or just do you see it like not in society or our communities anymore. And you're just trying to like get people's awareness of just like we're losing our sense of like
Oh no,
community.
yeah, I think I have a huge sense of that. I was also like I I was very shy. I was a shy kid. I'm a shy adult. um, I talk. I'm very talkative, but like kind of a recluse. So people often are like, "Oh, he's very outgoing," and I'm like, "I'm not. I'm like making myself be outgoing." Um, but yeah, no, I definitely very much spent a lot of my childhood. And I don't want to paint it like I didn't have any friends. I do have friends. I'm still friends with some of my childhood friends that are lifelong friends.
Mhm.
But I was a weird kid. I was like kind of an outcast, and a lot of my interests, like my interests when I was a little kid, are the same as my interests now. I was into comics and punk rock and chocolate milk, and that's pretty much what I'm into now. And
Fuck
like,
yeah.
I didn't have any other friends who read comics. I would go to the comic shop alone. It was a solitary, isolating thing. I didn't have a lot of friends who listened to punk rock. I would go to shows alone. I would just stand in the back and watch or go up front and dance. But I was by myself and I didn't make people. And chocolate milk isn't really a community thing, but you know, whatever.
Should be.
It should be. Yeah, I wish it was. I wish that I had a great friend, crew of chocolate milk drinking
Chocolate
buddies.
milk club or something.
You know, I could talk about that for a long time. We won't, but I could talk about the idea of bar culture being mirrored in other beverages would be really good. But you know, we don't have to discuss that.
That's for the other show.
Yeah, that's for a different show. That's for the chocolate milk hour. But I really do think, you know, the idea of a found family and finding your people and finding acceptance in that is really crucial. And I'm very lucky that I eventually found that in punk rock and have lifelong friends from that, and found it in comics. And you know, a lot of my closest friends are comic creators and comic fans and comic retailers and podcasters and whatever. Like, I found a community. And so I do love stories of the outcast trying to find their way, because I do think those are important stories to tell, because it's so isolating to be the kid is alone and
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
I'm weird. It's such a fucking bummer to be that kid, and I say that with very much like a very real understanding of it. And so I like to tell those stories of those people doing fantastical things and going on adventures and finding a place and finding a kinship, even if it's with a crazy robot or whatever it is, and finding, you know.
Yeah. And
um yeah.
I think you've mentioned before that love and revenge are some of the two best motivators in storytelling.
Oh yeah.
And after reading this first issue, I mean, I think readers are going to get plenty of both with from what little I've read, and it's just like people get this idea that the word revenge is kind of like a very harsh, brutal word, but revenge could mean a very freeing thing of just like like it's being free of something. You know what I mean? And it's just like
Yeah,
it can mean so many
yeah.
different things.
I'm always of two minds. I think I see people in my life. I've had people in my life who are driven by revenge or by grievances, and it overtakes them and it overcomes them. And that, in that regard, it's deadly and it's destructive and it's heartbreaking. But I also see people in my life who let things go, let
Hmm.
people wrong them, and let bad things happen, and just say, well, that's okay. And there's something very beautiful about being a person who can do that. But also there's something really beautiful. And I think we sort of, we vilify the idea of people standing up for themselves and
Right.
people trying to make right. And I don't love that idea. And I'm a big fan of grudges. I love grudges. I think,
Uh-huh.
you know, I don't think of myself as a spiteful person. I think of myself as a pretty compassionate person. I try to be every day a person full of compassion, who puts empathy and compassion out into the world. And but man, a good grudge is the best, when you're just like, that
It can
person
fuel you.
wronged me. Yeah, that person wronged me, and I'm going to hold on to that, and like, I'm not going to seek their downfall. I'm not going to try and ruin their life, but I
Hmm.
will pay it back in kind, maybe someday if given the opportunity. And it's great, and it's, you know,
Which
I
is
I
exciting for this book and what it entails if everything comes to fruition.
Oh yeah, I think but I'm cognizant of both in the book, so I don't want people to be like, oh, he loves revenge. It's gonna be a good revenge story. I'm also very aware that revenge sometimes is very destructive. So I think you're gonna find you don't know where it's going exactly. It's going to go someplace where all of these things are weighed and given measure.
Yeah. Um, so Annalise is with this. We'll just call him Robo Papa for right now. Kind of
Mhm.
like a fun Calvin and Hobbes adventure that they're about to go on, and there's a lot of retro futurism influence in this whole book, which is beautiful and
Yeah.
just kind of reminiscent of like that 1960s 70s style that just like is timeless.
Mhm.
It's weird to say that, but for me as like just a ingester of content. I love when robots are introduced, whether it be like the computer in war games or Ultron. There's just like a wide spectrum of robot intelligence, and
Sure.
going into the story, knowing there was going to be a robot. Uh, where did you decide to like land on the spectrum of like hyper intelligent or just kind of like hyper literal robot? It's always just fascinating to me.
Yeah, the we do a funny thing in the book, and this is a little spoilery, but I don't care. People don't, take your headphones off if you don't want to hear it. But
Skip ahead 20 seconds.
when we introduce the robots, they're very human-like.
Mm-hmm.
They're and not in appearance; they look like robots, but they act sort of human-like, but sort of stiff. And then
Right.
when you meet Annalise's father, who built them, you realize that that's also sort of how he acts. That he's very dry and he's very stern, but there's something under there, and you realize, well, he's built them in his own model. Like these are his children in a way. These are
Right.
Annalise's older brothers are these robots, and that's sort of going to be a theme for the book of just like the family aspect of that. But also, as you go on in the book, you're going to find out that these robots are very anomalous, that this is not a world of robots, that everyone else is very off put that these things exist, that they've only existed on this island basically, and everyone is kind of low key terrified of them. um and I really like that idea. I like the idea that we introduce them as this very natural thing where you
Right.
pretty much quickly get a handle on them, but then the world does not have a handle on them at all. And so that was sort of when I figured that element out, I was very happy, because I think it's a fun, when you do an alternate history, an alternate timeline, like the retrofuturism thing. Like, we don't say when the book takes place, but people are like, we're not doing like everyone's in bell bottoms and butterfly
Right.
collar shirts
Right.
and listening to
Right.
disco. We don't do that, but it has a 70s feel. It has whatever. But also, we're not saying it's the 70s. It's just an alternate world. But there's something fun about establishing a world and then picking at it and being like, it's not
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you thought. And the robots are just a really fun chance to do that, because you meet them and you're like, yeah, I get it. And then as it goes on, you're like, maybe I don't get it. I don't fully understand what this is. And I always like that stuff. I like when there's a buy-in from the audience, and then that buy-in is sort of clawed back as a like,
Right.
you know,
Well, it was cool, like just reading the first issue alone. You can kind of see them learn and like just like update their malware, so to speak.
yeah,
And they each have their own unique, quirky personalities that by the end of the book, you're just like, okay, I think I can kind of like pinpoint who
yeah.
was who in that scene, which was so cool.
Yeah, they're really fun, and there's a lot we want to do with them. But also, it's going back to the thing I talked about of like, it's a bigger world, so like, I want people to care about them, but also like they may not be around for very long, or maybe they'll come back. It's very fun to have them as characters in our back pocket. And there's one robot that sort of emerges as a main character by the end, but the others may appear, and
Oh,
I'm sure people will like them when they come and go.
dot, so to speak.
Yeah,
And you said earlier
I
that
gotta try and sell the book, man. I gotta do something here.
you can't give it all away.
Yeah.
We'll have to delete this episode.
Yeah.
You mentioned before you're back with Stefano Landini. You guys did some Punisher stuff and I think some DC stuff as well.
Yeah, we did. We actually did the DC thing while we were making this book. We've been working on the book for so long, and both of us have just been like getting pulled away to do other projects, and like, so we started this book, and then he was like, "Oh, they're giving me some X-Men, and I was like, oh, it's X-Men, like go do
Yeah,
it.
never heard of it.
And then I was like, well, I've got to go do some Joker, and he was like, okay, yeah, go. And then I came back and he was like, I'm getting Black Panther, and I was like, okay, go. And like he did a French graphic novel, and he just did Prodigy with Mark Miller, Dark Horse, and but in the middle of all of this, he was like, hey, I have like a few weeks off, and I was like, cool, we can work on our book. And he was like, I just really want to draw something for DC though. And I was like, oh. And he was like, can you get me something? And so I just called my editor and I was like, hey, can we just do like a grifter short together, me and Stefano? And he was like, he's like, I'm not super familiar with this stuff. And I was like, here's the first 10 pages of our new image book. And he was like, yeah, whatever you guys want to do is fine. And so I was like, cool, it's a grifter 10 pager. So yeah, we did just a grifter short story, and that was very fun. I think Stefano wanted me to get him Batman, but I was like, if you say to me you can do anything at DC, it's going to be grifter. Sorry.
Yeah, grifter all day. Sorry, no apologies.
Yeah. If you want to do a Batman story, call James Tynan, and he's always going to say Batman,
Yeah.
but I'm going to say grifter, which is maybe why James is so much more popular than me.
Is that like a comfortable pairing for you, just to like to work with another creator that's kind of just like knows how the inner workings just kind of go, and they're just like, you say something, they're just like, oh, I fucking got it, like don't even finish that sentence, bro.
Yes, but that's not how this book has been at first, because I fully thought I understood like how Stefano worked, and he is and I don't want to say this as an indictment of anyone else. Like when you make big two comics, you're often just paired with someone you don't know, and you're just like, okay, we're getting on stage together and gonna perform a scene. Like, I hope you're good. I hope you know your lines. And it's just you have to sort of play it safe. You play it close to the vest. And so like I only knew Stefano from playing it close to the vest. And as we went in this book, I slowly realized like, oh, he's amazing at action, just really great at action. And then, oh, he's really good at character stuff. He's really good at catching emotional moments. And then realizing like, oh, he's actually really good at like tone and setting and ambience and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, what he's best at is just storytelling, the simplicity of his storytelling. Like you just read a page and like you're never caught up. You're never not immersed, because he is just a master storyteller. And so because of that, because he's so good, and because I'm an asshole, I'm just constantly pushing it and being like, there's a scene in issue 3 where, not an exaggeration, I wrote in the script, I don't think you can draw this, but this is what I have in my mind. I don't think this can be conveyed in a concise way, but like, give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, I'll rewrite it. And he just came back 2 days later and was like, here it is. And I was like, oh my God, it's beautiful and it's perfect. And it's not. And I sent it to my editor. So I was like, hey, I know what this is. I'm going to send it to you. I sent it to people and I was like, I know what this is. Is this confusing to you? Like without knowing what it is? And they were like, no, this is the sequence and this is what happens. And I was like, yes. And they were like, it's very, the people were like, it's really cool. I was like, it is really cool. Like, it's really clever. And he's just amazing. And so, yeah, there's not, I would love to get to that level with him of knowing his limits, but I don't know his limits.
There is no limits?
Because I keep pushing him and he's just rises to the occasion and is just better every issue. So it's a little frustrating and also amazingly satisfying and wonderful.
The talented bastard.
Yeah.
So Andy and I, another co-host of the show, we do like a Patreon show called it's about like the James Bond comic books that Dynamite does.
Sure.
Because there's so many of them and they're mostly fantastic. But as we kind of like explore James Bond as a character through comic books and film and books, you kind of realize that the character is flawed for a multitude of reasons.
Sure.
And then like once you explore the super spy as like a character vice, like it's just like a broken thing of just like they're always like hopped up on pills or just like like sex addicts for like coping or whatever. And it's just like when you knew there was going to be a super spy element, were you just like tingling at the anticipation of like working with some of those weird traits or just like rewriting some?
I wanted to do the most absurd version of that. I wanted to just be like, this guy is awful But as he goes, you're like, oh, he's actually very good at his job. Like he's
Right.
the more you see him work, the more you're like, oh, Alistair Rook is a super spy for a reason. I'm yes, I love all those like tropes in the Bond world and all of that, but I also am really fascinated by that as an idea of the people who are so. I mean, we wrestle with it in culture all the time. People who are so um undeniably skilled at what they do
Mm-hmm.
that but they're monsters but they're bad people, and you're like, I don't know how to wrestle with that, because like you're like, and in the history of especially western art and western culture is littered with people where you're like, well, if you actually know about the person, like, my
Right.
god, but if you separate them from their work, they're amazing. And like composers and sculptors and filmmakers and painters and actors and comedians and musicians, just like vile people who are just so good and have made such an impression. And
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's a fascinating thing. And I never quite understood whether genius creates a sort of boredom that allows
Mm-hmm.
vileness to creep in, or if just sometimes if it's a coincidence that some geniuses are not vile and some are. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know how it works. I couldn't tell you why, this
I almost think it's
awful.
like a byproduct. Like you're so smart, you've done everything. Why not tempt fate a little bit, and then you just get used to it, and then just breeds more and more.
Yeah, I think I mean, I do think that's true. I think that, some of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life are huge assholes, but they're interesting people. Like, they have
Right.
interesting thought processes, and
Right.
it's
I
very
mean, take
difficult.
Chevy Chase. I mean,
Yeah,
like
sure. I mean,
he's
I
a
I don't know
brilliant
him,
comedian,
but
but he is a downright scoundrel.
yeah, I mean, I just watched the Saturday Night movie, and I was like, oof. They're not not fans, I guess. But yes, I mean, Fletch and Vacation are like two
Hmm.
foundational
Yeah.
works for me. Like, I'm not here doing this job without Fletch and without Vacation, for sure. Um, Caddyshack, like,
Oh my god. Even like him on Community was just
oh,
like
great, amazing.
borderline genius.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
genius.
he was kicked off for being
Yeah, for fist fighting with the rest of the cast. Yeah, terrible, but like, yeah, amazing. And there's a ton of that. Like, I'm not trying to forgive anybody for things, but like, Roman Polanski's inarguably one of the greatest filmmakers of the last 50 years, and like, yeah, he should be in prison. Like, I don't know, like,
what do you want me to say?
yeah, I don't know. I was gonna try and sugarcoat it and be like a little more delicate. I'm not gonna be delicate. Like, he should be in prison. Like,
Yeah. Two
I'm
things
not.
can exist.
Yeah, but it's like, well, yeah, but Rosemary's Baby, like, Chinatown, like, yeah, no, that's unquestionably a perfect film, but also made by a very damaged person who hurt people. Like, and this isn't a celebration of that, but it is something that fascinates me, and I find that I tend to just think about things a lot, and then they
Right.
end up in my books.
That makes a
So
complex character that people want to read about.
yeah, he's a so our James Bond, whose name's Alistair Rook, who's the sort of framework for our story a little bit. He's a very good spy who's a very bad person. But sort of a lovably bad person. He's not vile, like history's great vile people, except he kills a lot of people. So in that way, he is kind of vile. Whatever. He's
Yeah.
complicated, I guess.
He's
We'll
more
just leave
Martha
it at that.
Stewart than like
Yeah,
Mussolini.
yeah. He's not. Yeah, he's not a tyrant, but he sure loves drugs. So, put that where
Um,
you will.
so you said Rook, and that kind of sparked my memory of on the cover. There's
Yes.
a label that says a Rook spy thriller,
Yeah.
kind of like an old dime store novel
Yeah.
or something. Are we to assume that there may be more entries in the Rook spy thriller saga, or
Well, that's
is
a
that
that's
too much to ask?
that's a very loaded question. So no, we'll pull back the curtains a little bit. The book is 6 issues. That's the story we set out to tell. I don't like making. I don't like starting a book if I don't know how it ends. So we know
Mhm.
the ending, and we're telling that story. And I think we all have Netflix, and so we all know what it's like to fall in love with a character or fall in love with something, and then you're like, oh, they're
Right.
not making any more. I want to assure people, like, 6 issues, you're getting the story we wanted to tell. That's the story we wanted out there. But when we really started in earnest doing the book, Stefan, I kept thinking, like, man, I really like these characters. I'd like to do more. I don't know if we'll get to, because the market is what it is, and making comics is expensive, and whatever. And then Stefano came to me and was like, I really like making this book. I want to do more. I was like, yeah, that's what I was thinking. And so our idea is, you get your 6 issues, and then if people like it, we're going to do more. We know what it is. It's the very pretentious version I've been giving is we're making a New Hope, and if nobody shows up in 1977 to see it, then you get a cool sci-fi movie and you move on and you forget about it. But if they're lining up around the block, or in this case, like, just kind of pre-ordering the book in normal numbers, then we're going to do a sequel, and we're actually going to do 2. We're going to try and do 2 more, because we have three. We have 18 issues.
So you have your trilogy set up.
We have it set up. I know the end of what the full thing would be, but also if we don't get to that, it's very much the original idea that I'm very excited about and really love. So well,
that is very exciting for me. I'm a huge fan of the spy genre, and it's going to be nice to get something other than like a James Bond kind of style story. So like to get more entries into that genre from a creative team that I love is like the bee's knees. So that's very cool.
Thank you.
Earlier you mentioned your love for punk rock, and it does seem like music is a huge part of your life and your creative process. Just to name off some hits here: Archie meets the Ramones, Archie meets the B-52s. What's the furthest place from here with those badass 45s that came with the issues, which I have all of them because it's like just the sickest idea.
Awesome.
To marry those two almost exclusive like communities into one is like, I wish more people did that. I love that. And then We Can Never Go Home. You did some amazing variant covers. What a world we're living in where I can get a big black songs about fucking homage variant cover. Yeah. Like, never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be able to do that.
That was a fun one because it was exclusive to a comic shop and we didn't tell them what it was. And then all the We Can Never Go Home variants were punk rock records. And so people started really collecting them, and they were calling, and the shop kept getting phone calls being like, do you have the songs about fucking cover? And they had no idea what everyone was talking about, and called us in a panic being like, what did you give us? And we were like, it's a big black record. It's really good. It's,
it's got a nuance. It's not for everyone.
I don't know if you like shellac. It's sort of a, they did not like shellac. But yeah, no, I grew up in punk rock, and I am who I am today because of it. So it works its way into a lot of the stuff that I do, for sure.
So I was curious, since music plays such a huge role, what should a reader throw on for this series in particular? Like what would get them in the mood to read this series from you right now?
Oh man. The obvious answer is like, some like 60s, 70s Italian, like, just some like big band, weird avant-garde, like post-jazz, big band, post-jazz 70s stuff.
John Philip Sousa on acid. I see what you're putting down.
Yeah. Just get weird with it. But, you're not trying to go, if you go into like the synthy John Carpenter area, you've gone too far. Like, bring it back. You want to be more like Dario Argento, like Goblin, like weird orchestral arrangements of sort of stuff. But I will say that writing the book, for some reason, and I don't know why, certain books just like certain things just go with them, that I make a book, like certain things do to me. And a lot of the like late 70s, early 80s, like second wave punk stuff or like post-punk stuff has been my soundtrack. I wouldn't say that's necessarily correct, but like Mission of Burma, Gang of Four, Wire, stuff like that has all been like what I've been listening to while I make it. I wouldn't say that necessarily it's the soundtrack, but it's mine. So I feel like I owe it to them to share that.
Well, I mean, like the band you just listed definitely set the tone of like recently orphaned 13-year-old girl palling around with a robot bodyguard.
Yeah, it's a little bit clean, it's a little bit grimy, it's a little bit political, it's kind of angry, but it's not screaming at you.
Sure.
It's kind of sexy, it grooves a little. So like, yeah, it feels like, now that I think, I've never thought about it, why I was listening to that stuff so much writing the book, but I think now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. It makes sense. It has a very European feel to it, and we wanted the book to feel pretty European. Without feeling like a European comic. Like we weren't trying to do a French album or anything, but like I wanted it to have a Euro vibe, and so yeah, you can listen to that stuff, but also listen to whatever you want. Put on
Hell yeah, it's your choice, baby.
Yeah, put on the Peanuts soundtrack. I don't care.
Hey now, don't threaten me with a good time.
That's great. That's great. That's actually a good suggestion. Do put on.
Yeah, actually do that one.
Delete everything I just said. Just have me go put on the Peanuts soundtrack.
Official answer: Peanuts soundtrack. I've done an extensive review of the books you read. I'm a really huge fan of your indie stuff. Mm-hmm. I really haven't seen like a high fantasy comic book from Matthew Rosenberg yet.
Yeah,
is that something maybe you would want to tackle, or you're just like kind of honed in spy mode right now, or?
So I actually I pitched a fantasy book once, and it was pretty dumb. But I don't tend to do fantasy because I have trouble when there's not a set, easily defined rule set. And so once you put wizards and dragons, I mean, it's the same reason that I tried to steer clear of doing like cosmic stuff at Marvel and DC always, because I'm like, I don't know, that guy can reshape reality. Like, why does anything have stakes? Why does it matter? Like once your wizard shows up and you know, makes the waterfall run backwards, and you drink the emerald of life or whatever, like, if someone else was like, these are the rules, like here's a rule book, I would love to do a fantasy story, but my brain spins out when it's given too many options like that. So right. I have a hard time with it. I love fantasy stuff, man. I'm a big, Tolkien fan. I'm a big George R. R. Martin, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I never do it. I don't know why. It doesn't speak to me so much, I guess. I'm making it. I'm happy. Sometimes you're just happy being a fan.
You know what? That's actually pretty beautiful. Like, you can be an appreciator without having to dip your toe in and just maybe not enjoy it as much anymore.
I'm an incredibly huge Star Wars nerd, and I made some Star Wars comics, and then I was like, I don't like knowing all this. I don't like knowing how these things happen. I like being able to just read it. Like, and so like a lot of Star Wars writers are very good friends of mine. I'm really good friends with Jason Aaron and Kieran Gillen, Charles Soule, and a bunch of them, Ethan Sachs. Like, those guys are my buddies. And if we start talking about work and I start talking about Star Wars, I'm always just like, I don't want to talk about Star Wars, man. I don't want to know how this is made. I just want to read it and enjoy it.
I remember as a kid finding out that the lightsabers were fueled by rocks, and I was like, why the fuck did you have to tell me that? Like, come on.
I mean, look, we all like kyber crystals, and they're great. Yeah, I mean, I just watched the Star Wars Visions thing, and I know that's not in continuity, it's not canon, but they keep having people turn to the dark side, and their lightsaber changes color, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like, it's a crystal. What? The crystal knows if you're bad and changes color? Like, what? And I just hated it. And then I was like, that's not canon, but it just bothered me. I'm like, you're telling me too much.
You're taking away the beauty. Yeah. Matthew, before we wrap up, is there one last thing you'd like to tell the listeners about this book? Obviously, they can go get it at their local comic shops or online or digitally. It comes out March 26th. It's from Image Comics. What's like one final tagline that, like, what genres would these people be into that just like would really sell them for it?
If you like absolute Batman, he's going to be in the book.
That's true.
If you like Ultimate Spider-Man, he shows up in issue 2.
That's
so
true.
Pre-order, and they won't sell you issue 2 if you don't have issue 1. So all you speculators, sorry. No, I don't know. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of excellent comic books that come out every month, and I don't want to pressure someone into buying mine, but I will say that it's something that me, Stefano, everyone who works on it, Roman and Jason, Hassan, Becca, our editors, Steve and Eric, and everyone at Image are really like, we're really pouring our heart into the book and really working to make something that's important to us. It's not. This isn't just something that we're like, this would be fun. This is something we really care about. And I know that doesn't matter to some people, but to some people it does. If you're one of those people, maybe go into the comic shop and give them $5 and see if the book feels that way to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming from someone who has read the book, it is bombastic. It is high octane. There is a lot of heart here. There's a lot of family dynamics to dive into and dissect. And it's just a fun book about a young girl trying to find her place and a super spy killing a mad scientist dad. And I don't know if that doesn't rile you up, I don't know what will.
Probably Batman.
Probably absolute Batman, who is confirmed to be in this book.
He's in it too, though. Yeah, he's going to be there. He's so big.
Matthew, where can people find you for more of your stuff?
I'm just normally in my house. So I can come over.
So we'll drop the address in the show notes.
No, I have all the social media stuff. It's all vile, but I'm on there at Ashcan Press, ASHCANPRESS, and I have a Twitter and an Instagram and a Blue Sky and a
all of it, unfortunately.
Facebook. I have all of them. I hate all of them, but for the time being, I'm going to continue to have them. But the main one is I have a newsletter that I don't send out too much. It's pretty brief and short, but it's at ashcanpress.com. If you go to my website, you can sign up, or if you don't want to sign up, you can just read the newsletter there. But we also do a podcast there. My buddies, Ethan and Griffin, who are excellent writers themselves and made the Eisner-nominated Kill Your Darlings from Image last year.
AKA the Supple Boys.
They're known sometimes as the Supple Boys, the most unpleasant nickname in comics. And we have a podcast where we interview comics people every week. It's less of me. If this was off-putting to you, don't worry. It's more about the guests, I hope. But we send that out every week through the newsletter, so sign up there and you'll get it. And that's it. I don't know.
No, that's great. And as a fan of your Substack, check out the Substack. It's all good.
Thank you.
And remember, on March 26th, go to your local comic shop, pick up We're Taking Everyone Down With Us from Matthew Rosenberg. Matthew, thanks for coming on. First Interview Club. We do these once a year, and you've been chosen this year to be the recipient.
2025 recipient. Wow.
We'll send you your placard in the mail.
So excited.
It's 5 feet by 5 feet. So, without further ado, thank you everyone for listening. And as always, remember to bag and board them. Bye.
First Issue Club podcast is brought to you by Boulevard Brewing Company, the people responsible for our favorite drinks, the Space Camper Cosmic IPA family of beers. Our show is edited and produced by our hosts Mike DeStacy, Greg Lichtag, and Andy Vargas. You can find us on social media at First Issue Club, and you can join the supporters who keep our humble podcast going on our Patreon at patreon.com/firstissueclub.